This is Pretoria, better known locally as Tshwane, South Africa's administrative capital and birthplace of world-renowned names like Elon Musk and Oscar Pistorius. Pretoria is characterized by its historic monuments, the locals' love for their sports, and of course, this legend.
Others they are sick, others they have a low stroke. What is now?
The city is known to attract many migrants and foreign internationals from all over the country and the globe. And despite its rather shy demeanor, it houses some of the wealthiest people in the country, and it is hugely attractive to potential investors. In any country around the world, cities in general play a key role in driving their national economies. They are home to employment opportunities and diverse population groups and income groups. They reflect the interactive nature of a number of factors in a single symbiotic system. Like many cities around the world, Pretoria has its own characteristic slogan. The slogan states that it is a prosperous capital city through fairness, freedom, and opportunity. Now, this all sounds good and fair, but what we want to know is Pretoria what it says it is? I mean, if you ask me, the terms fairness and freedom are rather vague-ish terms we hear a lot in a lot more political contexts. However, if we rope in the term opportunity into the mix, it provides us with a much better context, as the slogan now correlates and speaks to the local economy, the functionality, and the socio-economic profile of the city. So in exploring this, we will look at Pretoria through the lenses of its geography, the economy, and its functionality, and in doing so we will be able to investigate what Pretoria represents not only to its people but to the South African economy, the developing world, and the world at large. Similarly to the story of Cinderella, Pretoria is not as exuberant as its bigger metropolitan sisters, but beneath that humble exterior lies a valuable gem. Now, spatially speaking, the city, like every other city in South Africa, has a characteristic apartheid city design. Now, this is something that will be the connecting thread of every South African city we will be covering in this channel, because the functionality of South African cities is always, in one way or another, influenced by this characteristic spatial design. The concept of apartheid is very pervasive, with the impact stretching far beyond the economy and the geography of South African cities. So, for the sake of this channel and objectivity, we will try our best to actually focus on the socioeconomic and physical implications. So, here we go. The apartheid city is a derivative of its apartheid regime. It's basically a cocktail of eugenics and modernist planning, all wrapped neatly in one very ugly package. This was an efficiently designed concept for a city which saw the majority of black populations in South Africa forced to move out of urban areas and relegated to separate designated reserves of land. These reserves of land were poorly located, poorly serviced, and had no character or potential within them whatsoever. Now, these areas were typically located on the outskirts of the urban areas, which meant these locations, or townships as they were commonly known as, had no identity, they had poor to non-existent basic services, and with no social or economic infrastructure in place, these places basically represented the opposite of what a sustainable community is meant to be. And as a result, this enabled a slew of economic ills to grow and fester over decades. Fast forward to post-apartheid South Africa, we see that the country still struggles to pull itself out of the hangover of apartheid, with townships today still representing what they did in apartheid. In the city of Pretoria, we see this within its main townships, namely Mamelodi, Atteridgeville, and Laudium. These townships are all spatially located in the extreme northeast, northwest, and south of Pretoria, respectively. They are characteristically buffered to the CBD and to the middle and upper income areas by either industrial parks, highways, rivers, or railroads. This simply being not only to protect property values in those areas, but it was to limit the access of people who resided in these areas to the rest of the city. This created a fragmented city and directly affects the efficiency and the functionality of Pretoria as well today. This all causes a bit of a schlep with respect to cost and efficiency of transport, especially to those who live in the poorly located townships. And on top of all of this, the contrast that exists between the standards of living and service provision between the different parts of the city negatively affects the land economy and the resilience of property values. With property values in these undesirable parts of the city decreasing and in other parts growing, this speaks to the movement of income groups. This movement of income groups piles on top of the already fragmented nature of the physical city and exacerbating income inequality as well. Social mobility has been something that South Africa in general has struggled to fast track, but these are but a few factors that have impeded the effective implementation of what is arguably well-intentioned policy from the government. However, despite all of this, the city of Pretoria has truly shown its mettle, and from a socio-economic standpoint, despite its shy demeanor as well, it is quite an inspirational character. Pretoria, alongside city of Johannesburg, has the highest income per capita and GDP per capita of any city in South Africa. This talks to the level of prosperity in relation to the rest of the country. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that Praetorians are living better lives and living it up compared to the rest of South Africa, or that social mobility is actually guaranteed when you move there. However, it does suggest that the conditions in the city are much more conducive to productivity, efficiency, as well as employability. The Human Development Index for Pretoria has a rating of 0.75, which is relatively high, and also owed to the fact that metropolitan areas generally have a higher standard of living and therefore a higher HDI. As a result of more efficient transport systems, the population that resides within townships have a slightly better way of getting around more efficiently in a rather fragmented city, which is one of the many underlying factors that influences the HDI rating of the city. Between 2012 and 2016, when the world was kind of trying to find its feet from a global economic crisis, Tshwane's average annual per capita income grew at almost double the average national rate. A big part of this had a lot to do with the concentration of public sector employees in Tshwane, which essentially hedged the overall city against any real decline in GDP per capita following the global recession. So the socio-economic character of a city is essentially a function of how productive the city is, its functionality, and what it means to the economy. And in identifying these factors, we better understand the local economy and the functionality of the city of Pretoria. So as we've already mentioned, Pretoria is a populous metropolitan city in urban South Africa, and is also one of the key contributors to the broader South African economy. Now, before we continue, we need to understand that from an economic perspective, stability is a fundamental component that couples a potentially prosperous economy. Unfortunately, in South Africa, our overall economic inequality coupled with political instability has made our economy look less than very attractive. And this could be owed to a whole host of reasons, ranging from the legacies of apartheid, which we have discussed briefly, to political instability and government maladministration. So looking at an individual city's contribution to the broader South African economy, an individual city's economy is not necessarily a microcosm of the South African economy. However, it does play a unique role through its contributions to the overall South African economy. Pretoria's local economy is dominantly oriented around the service sector, which is a good indicator for a potentially prosperous local economy of cities in an emerging market. To put some numbers to it, Pretoria has the third highest GDP contribution growth rate to the overall South African economy in 2019. It was just behind Cape Town and Johannesburg. And this has something to do with the fact that it just happens to wear the administrative capital hat. The city is the ideal location for foreign governments and businesses to locate their headquarters and delegates. And this also explains why the city is littered with more than 134 foreign embassies across the city, which in fact is the most in any African country. But anyways, the government sector plays an important role for Pretoria's functionality in the sense that the municipality tries to play to the strengths of the city. These indicators suggest that Pretoria has a relatively high ease of doing business rating, and this is in most parts attributed to the amount of capital available in the region. It has good access to the N1 and N3 trade corridors, and the location of government and corporate headquarters littered across this region allows for what some would say is good corporate clustering. However, these indicators alone do not necessarily mean that this is the ideal spot to start any kind of business. We need to understand that despite what the indicators suggest, they do not necessarily tell the entire story. See, macroeconomists are a cold-hearted bunch, kind of like robots who speak nothing but numbers. And the issue with taking the numbers as the gospel is that they don't necessarily discriminate. They don't necessarily factor in the complex soft issues that occur on the ground and are in play. However, the numbers do tell a part of a story, an important story at that. Another useful indicator is employment. In a developing country context, if more than 50% of the total labor forces work in the services industry, this marks good prospects for the economy. Another sector that deserves special mention is the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing is also a significant contributor to the local economy and is also one of the indicators for good economic prospects in an emerging market context. Now, it's known globally that developing nations' manufacturing contributions to economic development have not really changed significantly since the 1970s. However, the share of world manufacturing value added and employment with respect to South Africa has shrunk over time. As a result of premature industrialization, South Africa's manufacturing has declined over the years, and this could be owed to a whole host of reasons, ranging from something as complex as very country-specific policies to something as simple as a loss of investor confidence, amongst a whole host of reasons. Pretoria is home to the Tshwane Industrial Park and the Tshwane Automotive SEZ, or Special Economic Zone, the home of the biggest BMW and Nissan production plants in South Africa. Development agency plans is to promote manufacturing as a means to optimize local supply chains. So they do this so as a means to basically encourage transactions between local manufacturers with local buyers and local suppliers, etc., etc., etc. But one of South Africa's biggest issues and our Achilles heels has to be the fact that there always seems to be a breakdown which results in well-written policy and its implementation. So how effective these manufacturing nodes will be in achieving the goal is a function of how much the municipality enables these transactions to happen with ease and without any hiccups and issues along the way. Despite the gloomy shadows of the legacies of apartheid and the stark levels of inequality, the city of Pretoria ironically represents a rose that is trying to break through the proverbial concrete. Sure, it's not a full rose garden, but once the concrete barriers are removed, the sky is the limit for Pretoria. So, is Pretoria a prosperous capital city that reflects fairness, freedom, and opportunity? Well, ironically, the simple answer is yes. And no. The city in itself is moving in two completely different directions, which does not help with fairness in accessibility and mobility for all. However, Pretoria exhibits inspiring levels of freedom and opportunity by making the most of existing opportunities. Small businesses doing their best to optimize their productivity in tandem with local governments actually trying to play to the strengths of the city. As the capital of South Africa, it tries to set a good example. It attracts many migrants, which is great for the workforce, and the growth of its service sectors highlights good prospects for entrepreneurship and employment opportunities. Despite its many spatial, political, and socio-economic inefficiencies, Pretoria has positioned itself as a competent city which could very much in the future harness its potential into being one of the biggest contributors to the overall success of South Africa. To South Africans, Pretoria represents a place for employment for those in the services sector, as well as engineers and technicians with an eye for manufacturing. It also presents opportunities for entrepreneurship for those who seek to build something for themselves, or an opportunity to do business with foreign governments. To a certain extent, one could say Pretoria is also merely a glimpse of what the broader outlook on South Africa could be if the entire country functioned as a coherent, well-oiled machine. To the South African economy, well, apart from being a source of value added in the services and manufacturing sectors, Pretoria is indeed a key city where all the magic of international trade and policy is instigated and concocted. With its significant contribution to the overall GDP, we can go as far as labeling the city as one of the traditional powerhouses of South African cities. And to the rest of the world? Well, Pretoria might not be the ideal location in South Africa to visit as a tourist in search of a beachside holiday or an animal safari. However, with the world seeing a trend of increased investment in emerging economies and Pretoria having positioned itself in pole position for international relations in South Africa, the city is indeed more than capable of competing with other global cities around the world. Hi guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. As I always do, I have left my social media accounts details below. Feel free to slip us a DM, or if you'd rather, leave us a comment in the comment sections and we'll reply accordingly. We will always be more than happy to interact with our viewers. Otherwise, if you did enjoy the video, please consider liking and subscribing. We'd really appreciate it, guys. Thanks.